Our first speaker is Ellie Mackay. On Ellie's website, there's a quote of the day. This afternoon I had a look and it read, "Never grow a wishbone, daughter, where a backbone should be." Which I think shouldn't be a quote of the day, it should be a quote for life. It's ace. Ellie is a filmmaker, a self-confessed biologeek, and a science educator. She's going to kick off our evening with a tale of adventuring, a journey through Southeast Asia in the footsteps of no one other than David Attenborough. Please join your hands together for Ellie Mackay. Enjoy.
Good evening. Tonight I'd like to share with you a 3-year journey of self-discovery and optimism in Southeast Asia. It's led me to where I am today. In 2012, I quit my job and moved to the island of Borneo, which, as many of you will know, is one of the most richly and uniquely biodiverse areas of the planet, but also faces extreme challenges with unsustainable agriculture, education and healthcare poverty, and a loss of local cultural identity in the face of increasing westernization. While I was in Borneo, I taught biology, I led conservation expeditions, spent as much time as I possibly could in the trees. To wake up in the canopy and feel the breath of the lungs of the first breath of the jungle is to truly understand the interconnectedness of the natural world. It's really an amazing experience. It was there in my hammock that I reread my hero, Sir David Attenborough's autobiography, Life on Air, for the umpteenth time, and in it he describes his journey to Southeast Asia in 1957. I was struck and saddened that his accounts were quite different to what I had seen. His descriptions of the remote Indonesian island of Bali, with its grass airstrip, wooden immigration hut, and traditional ritualism, could not be more different than the false idols and excess seen there today, as anyone who's had the distinct pleasure of transferring through Kuta will understand. The discord between what he set out to document, to promote, and to preserve just 60 years earlier and the current state of the Indonesian archipelago was devastating to me. And I was deeply ashamed that in just such a short time we had caused such devastation to the area that I was now so blessed to be calling home. So it was with a heavy heart and a heavy pack that I set out in search of answers. I wanted to rediscover Attenborough's lost subcontinent before it was too late, but by doing so in a way that wouldn't cause the same devastation myself. I wanted to see if I could reconnect with the beautiful passages in his writing, and I wanted to see if there was hope for the conservation stories that had sprung up all around me in that region. So I decided to follow in Attenborough's footsteps, the journey that he'd taken 60 years earlier, and to do so in the most economically and environmentally friendly way possible. So hitchhiking, paddling, kayaking, staying with local families, wild camping where possible, and spending no more than a couple of dollars a day. My route took me through most of the regions that Attenborough speaks about in his book, and by reading each chapter in situ, I was able to draw direct comparisons between my experiences of today and his from 1957. But what I wasn't expecting was that my journey would become much more personal as I began to experience my very own versions. And so rather than just being a direct comparison, I started to face my own challenges. In Sumatra, I spent a summer planting rice. I have no idea how these women do it. They're 90 years old. They spend 10 hours a day in blistering heat and humidity, planting rice for the equivalent of about 5 pence per kilo. It's back-breaking work. I remember on my first day, I was so proud, standing up, looking back and seeing a whole row of rice that I'd planted, only to turn around and see my host had planted about 3 acres in the same time. I could never catch up with her. I don't know how she did it. She was an amazing woman. I kayaked, paddled, and swam the northern Sumatran River region, and I kept doing that until I swallowed so much water that illness forced me back onto dry land. I didn't have as much luck there. I tried cycling and was quickly hit by a truck. I fractured vertebrae and smashed both kneecaps. My mum is in the audience and doesn't actually know that bit, so I'm very sorry, Mum. I was fine, I'm fine. And actually, the few weeks that I spent recovering with a local family were some of the happiest of my trip. They taught me how to play drums in their local youth church orchestra, and it was absolutely magical. So there is a silver lining to every cloud. My next challenge was inspired by Attenborough's descriptions of Mount Merapi, which is the first volcano on the chain there. I decided to try and peak the top 10 highest volcanoes in Southeast Asia. This was a personal victory for me, not only because I am the least fit person I know and was still wearing a back brace, but also because the smell of rotting eggs makes me retch uncontrollably. And most of these volcanoes had active sulfuric vents. So Mount Lawu, which was the final number 10 on the list, erupted quite violently as I got to the top, so I had to descend really quickly, and the gases around me were spewing out volcanic gas, almost as much as I was spewing up my lunch on the way down. Luckily, I was wearing this, so it wasn't the end of the world, but it was not a very glamorous part of the trip. In Sulawesi, I learned how to carve funeral caskets. In Java, I learned how to stitch leather and make proper satay sauce. From Minangkabau to Makassar, the local children taught me how to dry rice crackers, bake cinnamon sugar, and toss chickens. This is the art of chicken tossing. Every one of these skills, the techniques in these crafts had not changed since Attenborough's visit of 1957. This is in Kinabatangan. I invented a game with my friends here called Funnel Crown. Funnel Crown, I think the rules are you run around all day, giggling uncontrollably, until all declaring yourselves the winner. It's a fantastic game. Throughout my journey, it became vibrantly clear that the cultural identities of these islands is nowhere near being lost. Sorry. As Westerners, we hear only the worst stories in the news. We visit only the tourist hotspots and we speak only English. But my limited Bahasa Melayu and my freedom of foot allowed me to visit unlimited access to the unspoiled regions, to villages and communities unchanged since Attenborough's team had arrived all those years ago. My time with indigenous tribes in Borneo, with farming communities in Java and Sumba, and fishermen in Flores, made my steps ever lighter as I rediscovered the vibrant soul of this stunning corner of the world. But back to biodiversity. Whilst the songs of the people still sing loud and true, it cannot be denied that the landscape is irreversibly and undeniably changed. The economic prosperity that Malaysia and Indonesia has faced in recent years has caused an untold devastation to the area. And as I gazed out on these plantations and the smog, once again I felt a sorry disconnect from the pages in my book, which, like me, by now had been in a few rivers, had a very damaged spine, and was looking decidedly worse for wear. In chapter 5, David Attenborough talks about Komodo and filming the first ever footage of the Komodo dragon, which I'm sure we've all seen. But he talks about the guilt he felt at the subsequent influx of devastating tourism to that area. The fact that a man who has done more to promote natural history than anyone else in living memory would have sleepless nights over the fact that he had caused that just highlights the circular difficulty of the need to balance the importance of seeing animals with promoting and preserving them. I arrived in Komodo quite fearful of what I would find, and also feeling maybe hypocritical for journeying to visit a place that had been destroyed by its popularity. So instead I visited as a research volunteer, which allowed me to visit the island without so much impact. In fact, what I found was such a strict environmental policy and such well-promoted jobs in the area in tourism that the whole island is so strictly preserved, valued, and protected. In fact, it's a fantastically stable development. I wanted to see if this was true of the other areas that Attenborough had put on the map, and so I spoke to local research volunteers and conservation initiatives around the region. Researchers told me of their surprisingly positive findings. CEOs of local corporations told me of massive investments in green initiatives in the area, and students couldn't wait to get to school to study science so that they could help to preserve their jungles for the future. Everywhere I looked, I heard stories of brand new species, amazing animals, and undiscovered treasures, just like Attenborough's tales from 1957. Everywhere I went, I heard positive stories of optimism. Not one person felt that change couldn't come. I wish I could tell you all the stories of conservation optimism that I came across, but I want to finish with a project that's very close to my heart. The SAFE project in northern Borneo is working with local loggers and palm oil plantations to develop a sustainable palm oil plantation of the future. Last year, I returned to Borneo to make a feature documentary about this story, as it's something that I felt so desperately needed to be shared. In documenting this story, I had the distinct privilege of being able to film an interview with none other than Sir David himself. In it, he spoke of his love of Southeast Asia, Borneo in particular, and the need to remain hopeful for its future. In documenting the project that I found at the end of my journey, what began as a nostalgic homage became a personal confirmation for continuing my career in conservation filmmaking, to promote these positive stories, the stories of hope for the future, especially in the face of daily new challenges being faced in the region. In conclusion, I learned that this region is one of the most threatened, but also one of the most resilient, resourceful, and happiest places I've ever been. I learned that despite 60 years of change, the heart of both the communities and the natural world are still beating strong. I learned that it's possible to experience deeply whilst treading lightly. And I learned that everything is okay as long as you pack a sulfur mask, a back brace, a funnel crown, and a good bookmark. Most of all, I learned that the cultures and creatures in this book are not 60-year-old history. They are the present and very much our future. Thank you.